我的台湾朋友，我给香港朋友，有一件比川普关税还大条的事情发生哦。And the local media only did a 简单的解释 that Meta and the CCP censored a couple of posts. That's it, right?
Wrong, 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 wrong.
Well, I gotta go. I watched this hearing twice, and once you see what went down, you will realize that Mark Zuckerberg sold out Hong Kongers and the Taiwanese to the CCP, placing every single Taiwanese person's life in immediate danger. So for this episode, you're gonna need more than just some popcorn, yo. You're gonna need a bottle of whiskey, and you're also gonna need to remove all fragile items from your immediate purview, or else you're gonna smash them in a fit of fury, because this is some legit 代志大条咯。Okay, so before we begin, I need to make something absolutely clear. And as you keep watching, you will understand exactly why. Everything in today's video is purely fictional. None of it should be taken as fact. This is all hypothetical content, yo, not reality. So Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg, please don't sue me, yo.
I was only kidding!
Now let me introduce our witness. Sarah Wynn-Williams is the former director of global public policy at Facebook. She's a former New Zealand diplomat and international lawyer who first joined Facebook after pitching her own job. After leaving the company, she's continued to work on tech policy, including artificial intelligence. Now, all of that you can learn from reading the back of her book, but there's more to it than that. She worked at Facebook from 2011 through 2017. She witnessed Facebook's rise from a niche tech company to a global superpower capable of bullying nation states. And she wasn't just some mid-level functionary. She worked closely with Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg. She arranged their meetings with world leaders across the globe. She heard their plans for China. She's no ordinary whistleblower, and she comes to tell us not merely about what has happened, but also what is coming.
Fun fact, Facebook and all the apps that it owns are used by 76% of Taiwan's entire population. Just last week, a major hearing took place in the United States where a high-ranking Facebook executive testified about an alleged collaboration between Meta and the CCP. Now, you want to stay with me until the end of this video because these allegations could have serious implications for Taiwan's national security.
You're goddamn right.
And I believe this is so serious that the Taiwanese government should consider legal action against Meta, yo.
And did members of the Facebook executive team or other employees at Facebook, Meta, ever brief members of the Chinese Communist Party?
Yes, Senator, regularly.
Exchanged information with them?
Yes, Senator.
What are some of the topics that they covered in these briefings?
I mean, it's incredibly broad. So you had meetings at the top executive level, so Mark and Sheryl, and you had meetings, all the way down to, regular engineers who would be providing briefings on cutting edge technology like facial recognition, which is obviously very helpful to the Chinese Communist Party. Facebook Live, as I mentioned, photo tagging, internet infrastructure, so how to build effective data centers. Facebook has a project called the Open Compute Project, which has 5 Chinese companies as a member of it. So it was at every level on every aspect of the many different technologies that Facebook has.
Now, here's something crucial to understand. Any company working with the CCP must first accept their position that Taiwan belongs to China. Think about what this means. If Meta is indeed cooperating or has cooperated with the CCP, then the platform used by 3/4 of Taiwan's entire population is essentially no different from Chinese state-controlled Weibo.
When there is a decision being made about what you're going to turn over, what Facebook, Meta, is going to turn over to the Chinese, all their demands that you said the company denied to so many other countries, but for China, they made an exception. When the decision is being made about exposing American privacy material and data so that the Chinese would have access to it, Americans not knowing that. The security questions that you raised, the AI information is given to the Chinese that makes them, quote, more competitive, but also means that they have sources of information that could compromise the security of the United States. I mean, when you consider each one of these, they kind of grow in gravity and magnitude. Are these decisions being made strictly by Zuckerberg himself, or by boards, or by open discussion? How much sensitivity was there to the fact that the decisions were historic in nature and maybe even criminal?
It's a really interesting question. I mean, you asked me in part about China. You know, to give you just one example, at the governance level, which is what you're asking me, the lead independent director on Meta's board was also on the payroll for the China project.
Now, you might have thought, like I did, that this might be Mark Zuckerberg alone wanting to cozy up to the CCP, right?
Wrong, 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 wrong.
This wasn't just Mark's decision, yo. It was the entire company's decision.
You testified a moment ago that one of the things that part of their value proposition to China was that they would help them, Facebook that is, would help China outcompete other American businesses. Can you just say more about that? I mean, that seems like an extraordinary thing to me. Here you have an American company going to our chief foreign adversary on whom we currently have tariffs of like 10 billion%, and saying, hey, we'd love to help you. We would love to help you beat all of these other American companies. That's extraordinary. I mean, what can you tell us about that?
I mean, I'd be happy to provide the documentation. I mean, literally the documents in which they were writing this were called our value proposition to be put before the CCP.
So was information related to artificial intelligence part of these briefings? I know you said that there were some sort of informal discussions, but did Facebook actually brief members of the CCP on artificial intelligence, to your knowledge?
Yes, Senator.
How is this for a contradiction? Meta is headquartered in America, yet they allegedly signed agreements to cooperate with China, widely considered America's greatest economic rival. Now, these agreements supposedly help Chinese companies to gain advantage over the United States in artificial intelligence, perhaps the most strategically important industry of our time.
Why would Facebook want to help China with artificial intelligence? I mean, what's the strategy there, do you think? What do you divine the intent to have been?
I think there are lots of, so I think we've talked about the general focus of the company of wanting to help China. You know, this is over a period of time where China was rapidly trying to increase its own technological expertise and trying to grow its own homegrown technology company. So it's incredibly valuable to have the brightest minds in the world show you how that technology works, if that was. And then I think at the moment, as you're aware, there's a debate in the AI community around whether open source models or closed models are more appropriate. And one of the considerations around that is national security. But it's not clear at this moment whether open source models or closed models will ultimately prevail. And there's a lot of money on the line. In some ways, you could say it's helpful if you want open source to prevail to have a strong threat from a Chinese model so that you can say it's really important that America wins this and we are the American open source option. And I think you can see the way that strategically plays out.
So what you're saying is Facebook's AI model, Llama, I think it's called, that's an open source model, is that right?
Correct.
And I think they just released Llama 4 or something just recently, the last few days. So that's an open source model. Many of the other American competitors, Sam Altman's company, for example, OpenAI, is a closed-sourced model, closed-source code. So Facebook has a fundamentally different take, an open source model. They're briefing the Chinese government, including CCP officials, on this model, on their information, and then we get the revelation of DeepSeek just a few months ago, China's sort of breakthrough on AI. Do you think that Llama had something to do with DeepSeek? Do you think that information sharing helped lead to DeepSeek?
I think it's been widely reported that the DeepSeek model is in part based on Llama.
So let's talk about Llama, Facebook's open source AI model. I've actually personally downloaded and experimented with it before, and at the time, I couldn't understand for the life of me why in the hell a profit-driven company like Facebook would invest shit tons of money to develop an advanced AI system only to give it away completely free.
Weird.
Well, now these allegations might provide a potential explanation for that puzzling decision.
In order to operate in China, the Communist Party requires American companies to register with authorities and host servers inside the country. And I think it's pretty well known that Chinese law requires that security services are allowed access to any data hosted within the country. Did any of Facebook's security team or its engineers raise concerns to management about Americans' private information being exposed to Chinese spying?
Yes, Senator, they did.
How did they do that?
They documented their concern in a number of ways. They noted that this would happen, that the Chinese would get access to the data, and they also noted their concern in other discussions and other documentation, saying, you know, my red line as a security engineer is to not be comfortable with this, but my red line is not Mark Zuckerberg's red line.
Fuck. My red line is not Mark Zuckerberg's red line. When Facebook decided to place servers in China, allowing members of the CCP to access all user data, Americans included, that already crossed her red line. And next up, you're gonna see whether Mark Zuckerberg even has a red line. Spoiler alert, he don't. So to be even more Bamihua and a little bit more whiskey, and if you're a Taiwanese or a Hong Konger who has a heart problem or asthma, well, you might want to pay that medication as well, because 真的是代志大条。
One example is that Facebook was targeting 13 to 17-year-olds. It could identify when they were feeling worthless or helpless or like a failure. And they would take that information and share it with advertisers. One of the things about advertising is advertisers understand that when people don't feel good about themselves, it's often a good time to pitch a product. You know, people are more likely to buy something. And so what the company was doing was letting these advertisers know that these 13 to 17-year-olds were feeling depressed and saying, now's a really good time to serve them an advertisement. Or if a 13-year-old girl would delete a selfie, that's a really good time to try and sell her a beauty product.
So Facebook is allegedly targeting vulnerable young people when they're emotionally low to sell them products? Jesus. Now, back in the day, I used to joke around that Meta was probably listening to my phone's microphone to figure out what type of food I was craving at night. But these allegations suggest something even more sinister, that they analyze your online behavior patterns to determine your emotional state and then try to exploit it to sell you specific products. And here's something that's even more troubling. If this technology can be used to sell you consumer goods, couldn't it also be used to sell you a political ideology?
And beyond that, it's things like things that often do concern teen girls, like body confidence. You know, that's something else that they use to target, you know, weight loss or other things on you know, children, really, 13 to 17-year-olds.
So, to your knowledge, did Facebook, after this email exchange, you know, where another user says, I think it's a slippery slope here, and then there's the admission, there is a level of behavioral targeting. I mean, just to be clear, I want everybody to see this. There is a level of behavioral targeting. I mean, these are Facebook executives. Again, this is a policy director in this chat acknowledging that this is what Facebook is doing. Did it stop? Did Facebook stop doing this?
Not to my knowledge, Senator.
Yeah, in fact, we know they didn't because other whistleblowers came forward to show that at Instagram, owned by Facebook, there was explicit targeting that goes on. There was explicit knowledge that the Instagram product was causing, in some cases, severe emotional distress, particularly to young girls. Facebook kept right on doing it anyway. Is that just because it made them a bunch of money?
Senator, you know, as a mother of 3 children, it's very hard to say this, but yes, you know, one of the discussions I had with one of the business leaders was like, we just don't need to do this.
Behavioral targeting. If Facebook actually has this capability, doesn't that mean they can also do ideological targeting? After all, there are a lot of people who openly share their political feelings. So with behavioral targeting and ideological targeting, they not only can sell products, but ideological mindsets. Sounds like the perfect tool for political propaganda, doesn't it?
This was a project unlike any other project I worked on during my time at Meta, in that it was so centrally led by Mark Zuckerberg, and he was so personally invested in this project. He learnt Mandarin. He traveled to China more than any other country. He had weekly Mandarin sessions with employees. It's hard to overstate how different this project was to any other project I experienced in my many years at the company.
So there would be no credibility to his denying that he knew about the risks, he knew about the concerns raised by his engineers and his China team, and he was intimately involved in not only the planning and the engineering, but also in taking those risks.
Senator, he was traveling to Beijing.
In the documents submitted to the subcommittee, Facebook appears to have been willing to provide the data of users in Hong Kong to the Chinese government at a time when pro-democracy protesters were opposing Beijing's crackdown.
等一下齁, so the whole point of learning Chinese was to tell Xi Jinping to his face that Taiwan belongs to China?
Really?
Hey Mark, allow me at 好机车 to introduce you to the most commonly used phrase in the Chinese language. And it's super easy to say. I say it at least 3 times a day just to keep the doctor away. Are you ready? 小熊维尼苏懒觉. Now what does that mean? This is the most traditional Chinese way to say I love China.
So that impression is correct. One of the more surprising things is that as part of the censorship tool that was developed, there were virality counters. So anytime a piece of content got over 10,000 views, that would automatically trigger it being reviewed by what they called the chief editor. What was particularly surprising is that the virality counters were not just installed, but activated in Hong Kong and also in Taiwan.
So, according to these allegations, posts reaching over 10,000 views are subject to censorship in both Hong Kong and Taiwan. And what's particularly concerning is that the program supposedly began back in 2018. Then, in 2019, the massive Hong Kong protests erupted. Now remember that about 70% of Hong Kongers used Facebook at the time, and this raises a very disturbing question. How in the hell did Hong Kong authorities identify those who opposed the CCP during their protests?
Senator, I mean, we've just spoken in your last question about, just one example of the amount of information that this company has. It is unfathomable. It's very, very hard to wrap your mind around the amount of data that this company has on each person who logs on to its service. It's of, private messages, but so much data, and all of that would channel through a POP server.
So then it is not just limited. The data Facebook holds, or Meta holds, is not just limited to the Meta applications.
Not at all, Senator.
So basically, Meta has the ability to build what I call a virtual you of an individual, where they go, the transactions they have, the different apps that they rotate from one to another. Is that accurate?
Absolutely, Senator.
Okay.
So it turns out that all of the services used by Hong Kongers and Taiwanese via Facebook, from Instagram to WhatsApp to Threads to Facebook Messenger, your private messages, even your call contents were stored on Facebook servers in China. So that means the CCP had access to the private conversations of Hong Kongers during the protests. Oh, and remember, Facebook has location tracking as well, so not only can it target your ideology and your behavior, but it can even access your physical location. This sounds like an absolute political horror shit show.
Was the editor-in-chief's or the chief editor's power limited to reviewing viral posts?
Oh no, it's extensive power. The chief editor would be able to turn off the entire service in specific regions, for example, Xinjiang, or would also be able to turn off or manage the service on significant anniversaries like the anniversary of Tiananmen Square.
So the chief editor, a creation of Facebook, was an Orwellian censor that applied to locations outside mainland China, to Taiwan and Hong Kong, to people not within the legal jurisdiction of China, but also obviously the Chinese themselves. And it was designed and implemented by Meta and Mark Zuckerberg.
Correct, Senator.
So picture this scenario. One day, if China were to launch a military action against Taiwan, and you tried to warn your friends using Taiwan's most popular platforms, Facebook or Threads or Instagram or WhatsApp, or even if you wanted to send urgent messages to your family, or even spend thousands of dollars on an emergency alert via their advertisements program, but it's all pointless because the CCP can make those communications completely vanish, or even worse, block your account entirely. So in this scenario, Mark Zuckerberg takes your money, sells you out to the CCP, and profits twice.
When discussing the role that political ads play in Facebook's business, you observed that peddling outrage and stretching the truth were just part of the game, and that outrage is a lucrative business for Facebook. I care about this a lot, just being in this business of politics and how we know how negativity is awarded online, not just Facebook, in all of the algorithms in these companies, and it's actually completely changed the ecosystem that we work in. Can you elaborate more on how stoking political outrage is profitable for Facebook and ramifications for democracy?
I think we're all living with the consequences of this every day. As I said before, what this company wants is to dominate as much time and attention as it can of every, not just in this country, as many billions as they can. And what they've learned is that outrage is a really good way to do that, but it doesn't, whatever it takes to have people glued to these services in their power, in their thrall, they'll do it.
And it ain't just profiting twice, yo. They even use your anger to harm your mental health, keeping you online for ages, targeting you based on your ideology, and pitting you against people, even your family members, with opposing views to spark internal arguments. 难怪 on Threads you always see Chinese people arguing with Taiwanese people, feminists arguing with men, and parents arguing with non-parents.
And the other thing is that this is a man who wears many different costumes. When I was there, he, wanted the president of China to name his first child. He was learning Mandarin. That was, he was censoring to his heart's content. Now his new costume is MMA fighting or whatever, free speech. We don't know what the next costume's going to be, but it'll be something different. It's whatever gets him closest to power.
And all this comes from a guy who learned Chinese to make money with a CCP. Oh, and let's not forget, this fool actually asked Xi Jinping to name one of his unborn children. And while Hong Kongers fought for their livelihood against a totalitarian regime, and Taiwan has been valiantly resisting invaders, Mark Zuckerberg sold these people out, sold us out, fighting for freedom, handing all of our data, communications, and most sensitive information to an authoritarian regime, all for the money.
God bless you, and fuck off.
So, to all the Taiwanese and Hong Kongers, if you get a chance, delete Instagram, Facebook, Threads, and WhatsApp from your goddamn phone. Find something else, because your personal safety is already in danger. And anyone who said anything bad about the CCP on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, or WhatsApp, or organized resistance against the CCP, including me, has already been behaviorally and ideologically targeted. And if you transit through Hong Kong or China, you risk arrest. So I would advise you stop using that shit, yo. Switch to Signal or something else. Otherwise, 代志大条咯.
That's using your head instead of losing it. Now I know. And knowing is half the battle. G.I. Joe!
Now, please remember that everything I said here is complete BS, yo. None of it is true.
It's true.
But you want to know something that is very true? In the next 2 days, Mark Zuckerberg has to appear before Congress in a 7-hour hearing to explain himself. Because maybe this Sarah lady is completely lying. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see how he explains himself. 这么精彩，让我们继续看下去。But before you 看下去, like, comment, subscribe, and share this video with all your Taiwanese and Hong Kong friends, and I will see you on the flip side. Peace!